It was bound to happen eventually. Donald Trump has finally grown tired of Pam Bandy. He's fed up with her failures, her inability to keep a lid on things, and her constant missteps and scandals. Instead of burying the Epstein files, she's managed to draw even more attention to them, and Trump has had enough. As a result, he's now turned on Bandy, and someone new is stepping into a key role at the DOJ. We're going to break down exactly what happened and why this is just the latest shakeup in Donald Trump's collapsing and failed criminal cover-up of the Epstein files. But before we do, please take a moment to leave a like on this video. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button. It goes a long way in supporting our work, and honestly, it's the best Christmas gift you can give. Now, before we get into how Bandy was replaced, let's start with a breakdown of the most recent DOJ cover-ups that have already fallen apart, as reported by Chris Hayes right here.
As congresspeople from both sides have been saying, protecting a bunch of bankers or lawyers because they're highly respected is violating both the spirit and the letter of the law. Again, you could disagree with the law, but Donald Trump signed that into law. And despite all that, there are some really valuable pieces of information the public is learning from the files once we kind of separate the wheat from the chaff. Today, for instance, we learned that during Trump's first term, this is back in January 2020, an assistant U.S. attorney wrote an internal email about a review of flight records as part of the government's case against Epstein accomplice Ghislaine Maxwell, who has subsequently been transferred to a low-security prison after talking to Trump's attorney, Todd Blanche. And this is what the email says. For your situational awareness, wanted to let you know that the flight records we received yesterday reflect that Donald Trump traveled on Epstein's private jet many more times than previously has been reported or that we were aware, including during the period we would expect to charge in a Maxwell case, the email states. In other words, during a period in which crimes were being committed. The email added that Trump had been on at least 8 Epstein flights. On one flight in 1993, he and Epstein are the only 2 listed passengers. On another, the only 3 passengers are Epstein, Trump, and then 20-year-old redacted. That seems like a justified redaction there. Remember what Trump said last year on social media, quote, "I was never on Epstein's plane or at his stupid island"? That appears to be patently false, right? We also learned over the weekend that Epstein had 10 alleged co-conspirators. This is probably the biggest piece of news to come out of these documents today. So in another email, this one from 2019, the day after Jeffrey Epstein was charged with child sex trafficking by the feds, an FBI employee asked a colleague for, quote, an update on the status of the 10 co-conspirators. Now, this email also shows the incompetent or possibly malign nature of DOJ's redaction efforts, or at least as yet unexplained. Some of the co-conspirator names were redacted, and that would appear to be a violation of the law under almost all circumstances. You can't redact someone's name just because they might suffer embarrassment or reputational harm, even though Donald Trump thinks you should. The law explicitly says you can't, but then in the same document, some names aren't redacted at all. As Senate Democratic leader Chuck Schumer said in a statement today, the Department of Justice needs to shed more light on who was on the list, how they were involved, and why they chose not to prosecute. There's also the case of a heavily redacted court filing quoting an Epstein survivor. That survivor claims that another friend of hers was one of the many girls that had sexual relations with Redacted. She confided in me about her casual friendship with Redacted. Redacted definitely seemed to have a thing for her, and she told me how he kept going on about how he liked her pert nipples. But in another data set released by the DOJ, that same document appears without any edits or redactions at all. And guess what? The unredacted name of the man in question is Donald Trump's. Now, it's not clear why his name was redacted from the other file they released. And remember, an allegation is not evidence of a crime. And in this case, it's not even clear she's making an allegation of a crime. Either way, the redaction, though, appears to plainly violate not just the law, but kind of the whole point of the law, right?
It is failure after failure after failure from this administration. And it's funny that when Republicans talk about this, even though it's not funny, that they're always talking about the PR, right? You hear this a lot from someone like Megyn Kelly, Megyn R. Kelly, as we like to call her on this show, saying that a 15-year-old girl, that's fine. That was her defense of Jeffrey Epstein. Real great stuff there, Megyn. I can't believe you have a daughter. gross. But Megyn Kelly said that this is a PR disaster. They don't care that survivors aren't getting the justice that they deserve, or that the DOJ and Donald Trump and everyone in this administration is breaking the law, a law Trump signed, and their failure to disclose. She says it's a PR problem. But in many ways, although it's just kind of a shallow way of looking at it, of course, Megyn R. Kelly is right. This is a PR disaster. Pam Bandy has no idea how to message, and that's essentially her job, is to get on Fox News and then get off and then prosecute Donald Trump's political opponents. And she's done neither of those things correctly, which is why Donald Trump, at least on the messaging front, is replacing Pam Bondi. A new report from Axios details that the White House B has begun managing the DOJ's account on Twitter, an effort to finish out the year and the Epstein file disclosure requirements set by Congress. So now we have the ghouls of Donald Trump's White House stepping fully into the spotlight, Stephen Chung specifically. And yes, I know it's Christmas Eve, and some people might say we should be nicer. But this isn't about appearances. It's about character. Stephen Chung is a deeply cynical and corrosive figure, and he now appears to be helping run the DOJ's messaging operation. And what exactly does the DOJ need messaging for right now? Not transparency, not accountability, not compliance with Congress, or even with the Epstein Transparency Act that Donald Trump himself signed. No. The priority is public relations. The goal is to protect Donald Trump and spin his botched, legally disastrous handling of the Epstein files. What this administration is openly admitting is that they see the DOJ not as an institution meant to uphold justice, but as a propaganda arm designed to serve Trump personally. That has always been the model. Hire people who aren't serious professionals, but who know how to rile up Fox News, Newsmax, and the far-right media ecosystem. Figures like Tucker Carlson, Candace Owens, and Megyn Kelly's audience. That's why so many of Trump's appointees are there, not because they're competent, but because they're loud, loyal, and willing to perform. In Trump's mind, the DOJ has one job: make him look better. That's the replacement happening here. But here's the problem for Trump. It isn't working. The spin is failing. The cover-up is collapsing, and no amount of messaging can fix that. And Lawrence O'Donnell explains exactly why right here.
Former President Bill Clinton's office put out a statement saying, quote, "We call on President Trump to direct Attorney General Bondi to immediately release any remaining materials referring to, mentioning, or containing a photograph of Bill Clinton." And there it is. That is the model for how you handle this situation if you are in the Epstein files and you believe you did nothing wrong. Please feel free to now consider all of the prominent names you have heard this year associated with the Jeffrey Epstein, who have not demanded the immediate release of any materials referring to, mentioning, or containing a photograph of that person. Donald Trump has never demanded that. Donald Trump has done everything he could to prevent that from happening. Jeffrey Epstein's biggest business partner, Les Wexner, has never said, "Release everything about me that's in the Epstein files." And he is not saying it now, after his name emerged today in a 2019 Justice Department email titled "Co-Conspirators." The email described attempts to subpoena the list of co-conspirators, which included Ghislaine Maxwell. A legal representative for Mr. Wexner told the New York Times that he was not a target of the federal investigation or considered a co-conspirator. He provided federal prosecutors with background information on Mr. Epstein and was never contacted again, the representative said. So I guess that settles that. If a lawyer for Mr. Wexner of Ohio says he did nothing wrong, that must settle it. I would love to have that lawyer for Mr. Wexner of Ohio join us here on this program and tell us whether he responded to a grand jury subpoena and whether he testified to the grand jury. I'd love to have Mr. Wexner of Ohio come here and tell us all about his relationship with Jeffrey Epstein, which no one has ever been able to understand or explain. Mr. Wexner is so much richer than Jeffrey Epstein could ever have dreamed of being, and no one's ever figured out why Les Wexner would be in business with Jeffrey Epstein in any way. So what was that all about? And we patiently await Mr. Wexner's lawyer issuing a statement saying that they demand immediately the release of all information in the Epstein files about him and any photograph of him in the Epstein files.
Donald Trump's goal was simple: control the narrative around Epstein. He wanted the public to lose interest, doubt the truth, and move on. He even tried to shift attention to Bill Clinton, who, yes, committed crimes, but is politically irrelevant right now. The focus should be on Trump, the sitting president, and that's exactly what we're doing on this show. If you want to support that, hit the subscribe button, leave a like, and if you stayed to the end, drop a blue heart in the comments, and until next time, I will see you soon.